Good morning, Judge O'Leary. A pleasure having you here.
Good morning. I should specify that I'm the former president of the European Court of Human Rights, out of respect for my successor, Matthias Guillaume.
Fantastic. We want to know first if you have any memories from your time at the EUI, because now we are celebrating, of course, the 50th anniversary, and maybe you can bring some anecdote to our radio.
I'm sitting in the cloister of the Badia Fiesolana, and I suppose my question for you is, how long do you have? I was here for 3 years between 1989 and 1992, and in April 1989 I walked up those steps to go to the interview, and I thought, I have to get this interview. This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. I have wonderful memories, both personal and academic. This is where, as I said in my speech earlier this morning, we took our first baby and giant steps intellectually and academically. And when many of us, we left not just with an almost complete PhD, some of us, myself included, left with our future life partners. So my life really changed here in Florence, and I was incredibly grateful to have the privilege of having a scholarship to come here and study here.
Amazing. It was really nice, a really nice recollection of a memory, and I'm sure that there's many young researchers who just took those steps a few months ago that I hope will remember this as much fondly in 30 or 50 or 60 years to come. That is amazing.
Ms. O'Leary, I have a question related very much to your, let's say, trade, in the sense that nowadays we live in a world where judges are voting on partisan lines, especially in the US. I don't know if you would say the same happens in Europe, but definitely that and many other things probably create a disconnection between judges and the people. Would you agree with that? Or in that case, if that is the case, how can we reconnect both worlds?
Okay, I think the first thing I'd have to say is, let's not confuse apples and pears. Okay. You started off by saying judges are voting on partisan lines. Mm-hmm. That's an incredibly general and potentially very misleading statement. The US Supreme Court is a certain court which operates along certain lines, but in defense of that court, and I leave the academics to criticize their different judgments, including some that have come out recently, Chief Justice Roberts has said there are not Obama judges and Biden judges and Bush judges and Trump judges. There are judges. Now, as I said, I'll leave it to the academics to analyze their record in more detail. Let's move to Europe, both at European and national level. Judges are appointed very differently in Europe. And over the last 10 years, the appointment systems for judges, not just in the European Union, but across the 46 Council of Europe states, a lot of them have been changed radically in order to guarantee the independence and impartiality, not just of the judges, but of the judicial institutions that those judges serve. I've worked behind the bench for 20 years at the Court of Justice of the European Union, and I've worked on the bench for almost a decade at the Court of Human Rights, and I simply could not subscribe to your sentence, judges vote along partisan lines. It's not my experience. Now that doesn't mean that judges, like other professionals, won't be influenced by different things.
Of course.
Their legal education, their legal system, their professional background, their social environment, the environment in which they grew up, perhaps also their view of the world and politics. But
for sure in the US it's different from Europe, right? We see the Supreme Court that is always divided in the same way.
I leave you to invite a US Supreme Court judge and they can answer to that.
Yeah.
But I can only speak to the justice system that I know in my own country, Ireland, and to the two European courts. And there I would say there are significant mechanisms in place, both before a judge is appointed, but also when the judge is sitting. A judge can be recused because there may be a conflict of interest. Either the judge naturally recuses him or herself, or the judge can be recused by the judicial formation. So it's important not to generalize. It's also important, of course, that judges and justice systems seek to preserve the confidence that people have in the impartiality and the independence of those institutions and of the individuals that serve. And that's the heavy responsibility that lies on the shoulders of every single judge every single morning as he or she looks themselves in the mirror.
That's fantastic. That's a fantastic answer. I have another question that is also a bit difficult, because now we see that the independence of judges, especially of international courts, it's been under pressure. We see the cases of the International Court, Criminal Court Justice, for example, a French judge among those which were subject to sanctions from the US. And this, of course, is a big punishment to do their jobs. How do you think this is affecting the international courts at this moment?
It's a really excellent question, and you're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to be really precise on language again. Judges work with words, and we have to be very precise. You said that the independence of international courts is questioned. It's not that their independence is questioned. It's that their authority is being questioned, and the exercise by judges on those courts of their judicial function is being questioned. The ICJ is probably the most prominent example because of the sanctions imposed by the US administration on individual judges and members of the registry because of their adoption of decisions in relation to arrest warrants in relation to Israeli leaders. But that pressure is seen in the European Court of Human Rights, where the court is under a lot of pressure at the moment, political pressure, because of the sensitivity of migration across the Council of Europe and within the European Union. That is also seen in relation to the Court of Justice of the European Union, where individual member states react negatively to certain decisions of that court. It's very difficult for judges to operate in that environment, but that doesn't mean that they can or should relinquish their judicial responsibilities. Judging is not an easy job, and nobody goes into that function without recognizing the responsibility on their shoulders, which I referred to previously.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is a great answer. Do you have questions for?
Yeah, actually I had a question which is a follow-up to your keynote that you just delivered. The title of the panel was Academic Freedom, Rights, Resilience and Responsibilities 15 Years On. So I wanted to hear your opinion as a judge, as a legal practitioner. What do you think about academic freedom? Because we have seen a shift in the past 50 years. At the beginning, academic freedom was mostly a way to protect academia from the influence of politics. But nowadays the influence comes not only from politics, but from the society at large, from the press, from digital media, from grassroots idea that right or wrong turn out to be very prominent. So what's your take on academic freedom, considering this environment that we're in and your personal profile?
You know, during my keynote speech, I deliberately looked back to 1976 and then traveled the road to 2026, the road that Europe has traveled since then and the road that the EUI has traveled. And the headlines that I showed the audience was also to try and remind this generation, let's not catastrophize everything or think that all of this is transformational moments and the rupture. 1970s were a really difficult decade in which academic freedom can come under pressure politically, societally and financially, and that existed in the past as well. Not everything is new. What is new is that we're very conscious of it and we see the extremes to which pressure on academic freedom can come, including in the United States at the moment. And as I said in the keynote, academic freedom is actually one of the essential components, along with independent and impartial justice systems, for our democracies to continue to flourish. The responsibility on academics, just like on judges, is to communicate with the public, explaining what do we do, why do we do it, why do you need this, and why does the health of our societies also depend on us carrying out our functions in being protected by academic freedom.
One last question, which is more or less the theme of this event. We are here to ask, what does the European University Institute need to do to remain relevant in the next 50 years, in your opinion?
I think I touched on this also in the keynote. The EUI cannot detach itself from the society in which it lives, the society which it serves. Academic freedom is wonderful. There is a risk that academics can also find themselves working in a bubble, too detached from that society, which they are trying to develop and preserve. And I think that distance has to be breached. And I think the EUI has recognized that very clearly in its new strategy, 2026 to 2031. Keep talking to the public, find ways to communicate if the ways that we have now are not working, and keep bringing back your EUI alumni, which is the EUI's secret weapon.
We will. Ms. O'Leary, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much to both
Thank
of
you very much for your wise words.